What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're picking up right where we left off in the last video of the best fantasy football draft picks that you can make this year. Last video was rounds 1 through 6. I'll put the video up here so you guys can check that one out if you missed the last one. But now we're going to be talking about the middle rounds, rounds 7 to 12. Guess round 12 is kind of more of late round draft pick, but regardless, this is going to be somewhat the middle of your draft. And while it may be arguably a boring part of your draft, this is the most important part of your draft. This is where you're going to find your league winners. This is where you're going to swing for the fences and take big risks in hopes for big outcomes. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. I won't hold you any longer. Grab your favorite bev, grab your favorite snack, and let's roll the intro. And before I go ahead and talk about round 7, I do want to make an announcement. Saturday, August 29th, I will be doing a 12-hour mock draft live stream. This was something I did last year with the subscribers. We had a great time. Everyone that joined in had a blast. I'm looking for anyone that wants to participate, anyone that wants to ask their fantasy football draft questions. If you have fantasy football drafts coming up and you want to make sure you're asking your questions, you're seeing how these mock drafts are going to go, Saturday, August 29th, 8 p.m. I'm going to be live all night going into the morning on Sunday. And yeah, you're definitely not going to want to miss it. You could ask anyone that participated last year or was in this chat last year. We had a great time doing that. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you there. But yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the video now. In round 7, if you didn't take Tyler Warren like we left off in the last video, maybe you took a Jalen Warren or Ramondre Stevenson instead, or somebody else. Maybe you just took a tight end earlier on like a Trey McBride, Brock Bowers. That's all well and good. For those that want a tight end in round 7, Tucker Kraft is the best value at the tight end position in any round of this year's fantasy football drafts. And the reason why I feel that way is because we're really pumping the price up on Christian Watson very high. While yes, he should have a breakout season, he also doesn't stay healthy and doesn't play every single game of the season. I know Tucker Kraft is coming off of an ACL injury. Maybe we can't trust him to stay healthy. But if he does play, I would bet that he is probably more of a number 1 receiver in this offense than a Christian Watson would be. So getting Tucker Kraft in round 7 when you have to draft Christian Watson like about round 5 or so, I think Tucker Kraft is the most affordable option here. Part of why I am not so high on Christian Watson is I think we're undervaluing what a Jaden Reed or Matthew Golden could do in this offense without Romeo Doubs as the top pass catcher. It's not to say that Christian Watson won't have a great season. I think he's just a little more overpriced, and guys like Jaden Reed and Matthew Golden and Tucker Kraft are much cheaper, much better options in terms of risk and reward. Tucker Kraft was the top option before he got hurt last year, and if he could pick up where he left off, round 7 is an absolute steal for this player. But maybe you already took a tight end. Maybe you have no interest in taking Tucker Kraft. That's all well and good. I would be looking at somebody like Rico Dowdle here in round 7. I think that Rico Dowdle has a great chance to, even if he's not the top running back in this Steelers offense, I think just like last year where they played Jalen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell a lot, we could see the same kind of blueprint or formula for these 2 running backs this year. So Rico Dowdle is a great pick in round 7 if you're not looking for a Tucker Kraft or a tight end in general. And if you play in a 12-man league, maybe even a 14-man league, round 7 could be a good opportunity for you to go ahead and grab a quarterback. There's guys like Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert that are going in that round 7 ADP. So if you play in anything that's larger than a 10-man league, I would say this is a great opportunity in round 7 if you don't want Tucker Kraft to go get your quarterback. But if you play in a league where there's not that many quarterbacks being taken, a 1-quarterback 10-man, stay away from the quarterbacks here. You can always get one later. I would be looking for somebody like Tucker Kraft at a discount here. In round 8, somebody that I'm probably going to spend a lot of time talking about. So if you don't agree with this one, you can feel more than free to fast forward and pass on this piece of knowledge and information. In round 8, assuming you already have most of your positional players, like your running backs, you have a couple of those, you have your starting wide receivers and your flex already filled out, you may even have a tight end at this point heading into round 8, you got to start swinging for the fences here. You need to start finding guys that are league-winning potential and have league-winning upside, and I think Blake Corum of the LA Rams here in round 8 perfectly fits that mold of exactly what you want out of a league-winning running back. And I understand there is a risk when taking Blake Corum here in round 8. This is somebody that's the RB32 off the board, yet is a clear handcuff or backup running back to Kyren Williams. But let's discuss why I think Blake Corum is such a great draft pick here, and arguably the perfect draft pick here in round 8 for somebody that wants to build a league-winning team in fantasy football this year. Blake Corum was the RB40 in fantasy last year and never played more than 46% of the snaps in a single game last year, so none of these stats are very flashy or promising. So, Turtle, why do you say Blake Corum must be drafted in round 8 when this is clearly a backup running back? This is clearly someone that didn't do that great in their backup running back sample size last year, yet you're telling us we need to spend an 8th round pick on him. Well, that's actually because Blake Corum, by the analytics and by the stats that you're not looking at, tells us that Blake Corum could be on his way to a breakout in year 3 of his fantasy football career. If you were pushing for a playoff spot or going for a fantasy championship last year, from weeks 13 to 17, which is the end of the fantasy football season, weeks 13 and on, Blake Corum was the RB17 overall. He put up monster numbers down the stretch, and if we take away the fact that he barely even played week 17, he was the RB8 for those 4 weeks prior to that, but we'll take the entire sample size up until the championship week. The RB17, a top 20 running back in fantasy, that's pretty good. And not to mention, on a per touch basis, running backs that went for 10 yards or more last year, and measuring how explosive they were according to Player Profiler, there were 2 running backs last year that were the most explosive in the league at getting 10-yard rushes on the ground or more. Those 2 running backs are Devon Achane, no surprise here, and Blake Corum. Yes, Blake Corum, the guy that probably played 40% of the team's snaps all season long, was number 2 in explosive rushes. And in terms of breakaway runs, 15 yards or more, again, a backup on a very limited opportunity and clearly not the starting running back at all last year. Blake Corum, in a small sample size last year, was 15th amongst all running backs in breakaway runs. So runs of 15 yards or more, he was top 15. In terms of how many times he touched the ball, went for 10 yards or more, he was second to Devon Achane. We're talking about a player that, if given the opportunity to even play half of the snaps, to play 45% of the snaps in this offense, Blake Corum could be a league winner for us in fantasy football. And in terms of true yards per carry last year, Blake Corum was 6th amongst all running backs in that stat. So again, this is an extremely efficient player when he gets the touches. Top 15 in breakaway runs, number 2 in most explosive runs. This is a guy that should see a lot more work this year in 2026 than he did in 2025. And while it may be the inverse of what Zach Charbonnet and Ken Walker were, where Ken Walker would do all the work and Zach Charbonnet would punch it in for the touchdowns, I see a lot of this in what Kyren Williams and Blake Corum could do. Yet, obviously, Kyren Williams is going to be the guy that probably punches it in for a touchdown. But make no mistake about it, Blake Corum has no problem, when given the opportunity to do so, to run the ball in goal-to-goal situation. While Kyren Williams last year was the much more dominant player last year in terms of red zone scoring, had 13 total touchdowns to Blake Corum's 5, where it gets really interesting is where we get to, from the 5-yard and in, how many of those touchdowns total that Blake Corum scored versus the total amount of touchdowns that Kyren Williams scored. Kyren Williams, 13 total touchdowns led to 8 rushing touchdowns, while out of 5 of Blake Corum's touchdowns last year, 4 of those came from inside the 5-yard line. In a world where Kyren Williams isn't going to have 67% of the backfield touches from the 5-yard and in, and Blake Corum starts to get that down to maybe a 50-50 split, Blake Corum is going to get a lot more scoring opportunities on the goal line and will make touchdowns out of that, as we saw last year. Whereas Kyren Williams, yes, had plenty of touchdowns. He was the RB9 overall. Nothing wrong with what he did. There was no signs of him slowing down or lack of ability for Kyren Williams. Blake Corum could see a role expand for him just because of how truly dominant he was when he was touching the ball. I don't expect him to outpace Kyren Williams either, but if this gets to 50-50, we're looking at a running back that could finish around the top 25. There are a lot of ifs here when we talk about why we should be taking Blake Corum at his RB32 price tag in round 8, swinging for the fences, trying to get a league-winning pick. But one thing that is concrete and factual about Blake Corum is that he is an analytical darling. No matter how you slice it up, when Blake Corum touches the ball, good things happen in this Rams offense. The Rams offense is a high-powered, high-scoring offense, and we should be looking at Blake Corum as a potential sneaky candidate to break out in 2026. If Blake Corum is able to get more touches than he did a year ago, he could easily be a top 25 running back for us, and you're getting him at an RB32 price tag. In round 9, the next player I want to talk about, the home run pick, the easiest. I think this is a layup pick here in round 9. I think this is probably the easiest one, no question about it. Michael Pittman Jr. of the Pittsburgh Steelers is going to come in right away and be the number 1 wide receiver and be a great fantasy football option for us, and it costs you a 9th round pick in fantasy. The reason why I think he's a steal and why I think Michael Pittman Jr. is one of the most mispriced players in fantasy this year is solely because we're adding a guy who's capable of having 110 to 150 targets and adding him to an Aaron Rodgers offense where he's going to find him in red zone opportunities. He's going to find him over the middle and short and intermediate routes. But now you're going to ask me, well, Turtle, how come DK Metcalf was supposed to be all of these things last year and it didn't work out for me, and he was rather disappointing as to where I drafted him as ADP? There were a lot of great weeks, but there were a lot of disappointing weeks as well. And the answer to that is strictly in terms of how great Michael Pittman Jr. is as a route runner versus how great DK Metcalf was or was not, as I should say, last year. Michael Pittman Jr. last year against man and zone, didn't matter the coverage, was a much better separator than DK Metcalf was. DK Metcalf is great in terms of big playability, run after the catch, all of those things. But when we talk about red zone opportunities, when we talk about getting 10 catches or 10 targets in a single game, Michael Pittman Jr. is going to fit that bill better and be a way more reliable PPR option than DK Metcalf will be on a week-to-week basis. While Aaron Rodgers may not be in his prime any longer, he's still great at identifying man-to-man coverage and understanding what's going on in the defense before the ball is even snapped. So in man-to-man coverage, he's going to find the better man-to-man separator, albeit the Pittsburgh Steelers offense with play caller Arthur Smith is not going to throw the ball a whole lot, but Michael Pittman Jr. will be extremely efficient and reliable in the opportunities given to him, which is why every single one of you should be drafting Michael Pittman Jr. in round 9 if you have the chance to do so. In round 10 here, let's talk about rookie wide receivers, because my golden rule when I'm drafting a fantasy football team is always make sure you're grabbing at least one rookie wide receiver in your drafts. They have low opportunity costs when you get to this part of the draft, and their potential and ceiling is basically limitless. If you were somebody that drafted Emeka Egbuka last year, no, it wasn't a 10th round pick, obviously, but if you drafted Emeka Egbuka, you saw the reap and the rewards of those benefits massively in the beginning of the season. If you were someone that took Brian Thomas Jr. their rookie season, again, not a 10th round pick, but somewhere in those middle rounds, that pick ended up being a league winner for you. So with round 10 being on the board, you're looking at wide receivers that are available. There are 2 great options here that I think we must be leaving with at least one of them. And those 2 players are DeJon Stribling and Casey Concepcion. Let's start with Casey Concepcion. Casey Concepcion is clearly going to be the number 1 wide receiver in this offense. They're clearly not going to be a great team, and I understand that, so it's a little scary or hesitant to draft a top pass catcher in a bad offense, but there's going to be plenty of opportunities for Casey Concepcion to get the ball, being that the Browns are going to be trailing a lot. They're not going to have a lot of game scripts where they can run the ball a whole lot. So Casey Concepcion fits the bill of somebody that you can buy low, and maybe he's even a top 25, top 30 wide receiver, and it doesn't cost you that to get him on your drafts. Just watch the clips of Casey Concepcion in practice, watch his college tape. This guy is a true playmaker, and the Browns did the absolute best thing they could have by drafting him, and I think he's going to make an immediate impact in the NFL. So I want him on my fantasy football team for that reason alone. And for DeJon Stribling, you've already heard the hype and the noise that DeJon Stribling is making out of 49ers camp and in these preseason games, so you don't need me to explain all of that much. We've made a video early on in late June about why we must be drafting DeJon Stribling, and if you haven't seen that video, I'll put it up here so you guys can check that one out. But if you need a quick little summary instead, I got you. Don't worry. What makes DeJon Stribling so valuable is that he can play all 3 positions of the wide receiver role. He can be the X when Mike Evans isn't playing and Mike Evans gets hurt, because Mike Evans at his age, unfortunately, is someone we can't rely on to play 17 games. So there's probably going to be opportunities there. He can play the Z and he can play the slot. There will be more opportunities alone just because Ricky Pearsall isn't there. Christian McCaffrey played all the games in 2023, missed a lot of the games in 2024, played all the games in 2025. What do you think is going to happen in 2026? I don't have the answer to that, but if you're good at recognizing patterns, you would assume that there is a chance that Christian McCaffrey doesn't play every game this season. And if that is the case, DeJon Stribling is going to get more receiving work because Christian McCaffrey was their number one receiver last year. So we have two guys left, Mike Evans and Christian McCaffrey, that could possibly miss time due to injury this year, as their careers have shown us the track record to prove that now. And did I mention, by the way, George Kittle's going to start the season on the PUP, so he's going to miss at least 4 games this year. If DeJon Stribling can stay healthy, this is a league-winning wide receiver just because he has to be on the field. He has to replace that Jawan Jennings role. I understand they added Deebo Samuel, but DeJon Stribling is going to be able to play in more opportunities on the field just because he can play every single position, where Deebo Samuel is likely going to be the permanent slot guy for this offense. So for all these reasons, I really like DeJon Stribling this year, and don't be surprised if you see a future video on my channel where I'm talking about players that I would reach for and are massively mispriced in fantasy football this year at their ADP, and DeJon Stribling may or may not be one of those players. In round 11, if you didn't take a tight end by now, I think Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews are great options for your team. Again, if you haven't made that pick yet, if you haven't pulled the trigger on one of those early round tight ends, you missed out when I said to take Tyler Warren. You missed out on Tucker Kraft. You can definitely get a really solid tight end here. But maybe you already drafted a tight end. That is all well and good. Keaton Mitchell of the LA Chargers. I know that I am a big Omarion Hampton fan, but I can't trust Omarion Hampton to play all of the games this year, considering the injury that he suffered last year is not his first time suffering this injury, and who's to say that it can't pop up and re-injure yet again. And it feels like long time ago, back when the dinosaurs were around when this was the case, but a lot of us forget that early on in the season last year, Najee Harris was forcing his way onto the field and taking away opportunities for Omarion Hampton. I get it, he was a rookie, they didn't want to run him out there all the time, but it took a Najee Harris getting hurt for Omarion Hampton to reach bell cow status. And if we take that into consideration and realize that Keaton Mitchell is a very serviceable backup running back, they may end up giving Keaton Mitchell more opportunities than we would like. So that's scary if you want to draft somebody like Omarion Hampton in the second round of your drafts. I would say go after Keaton Mitchell definitely then. But I think Keaton Mitchell is somebody that could take away plenty of opportunities from Omarion Hampton. And if Omarion Hampton were to get injured again, you have a great running back and a great offense in Keaton Mitchell. I like Keaton Mitchell. I don't think this is the perfect draft pick here in round 11, but I think it's a lot better than the wide receivers you could have drafted. And if you are already following the steps and protocol of what I've been telling you to draft in each round, you probably don't need a wide receiver here in round 11. You probably need the running back more. So Keaton Mitchell makes the absolute most sense. And lastly, in round 12, I really like Tyler Allgeier. I know that's not a sexy pick. I know that's not a flashy pick, but how much can we trust the Arizona Cardinals to run out Jeremiah Love as much as possible? They did that in the first preseason game, and Jeremiah Love was banged up, and now they're not going to play Jeremiah Love probably for the rest of the preseason. So with that information, if something were to happen to Jeremiah Love, Tyler Allgeier becomes a premier handcuff and somebody that you can start every single week in fantasy. So whether it's best ball, whether it's redraft leagues, Tyler Allgeier makes the most sense here in round 12 because he's a rookie and because they're not going to run him out there every single snap of the season for Jeremiah Love. Tyler Allgeier could easily be the vulture that steals goal line touches because we've already seen him do it with Bijan Robinson in Atlanta. They obviously paid Tyler Allgeier a nice contract to be here, and it's easy to forget about him because they have Trey Benson, they have James Conner, they have Jeremiah Love. But this is probably going to be the guy that is the thorn in your side if you're a Jeremiah Love fantasy owner. So I believe Tyler Allgeier must be drafted at this spot. And if you're more concerned about getting a wide receiver here at this point, I think what makes the most sense, hearing the things that we are about Emeka Egbuka and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver room, I think Ted Hurst is a great draft pick here in round 12 if you don't want to take another running back. If Emeka Egbuka isn't ready to go in week 1, because we don't know for sure right now or not if he is going to be ready to go, if that injury continues to limit his potential and play during the season for Emeka Egbuka, we know Jalen McMillan is already hurt. Ted Hurst could easily fill in as the X-receiver guy. This is a big, strong, fast receiver. It won't affect how much Chris Godwin plays. I know everyone's excited about Chris Godwin this year and his 8th-round price tag. I think that's a little too expensive for somebody that's going to be the slot wide receiver with a lot of changing pieces around him. It's not to say that you shouldn't be drafting Chris Godwin, but would I rather draft Chris Godwin in the 8th or take a Ted Hurst in the 12th, knowing that these Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receivers are already injury-ridden? Again, it's not to say that I think Chris Godwin is a bad draft pick by any means, but in round 12, it cost me nothing to get somebody that's probably going to play a lot if Emeka Egbuka and Jalen McMillan are injured throughout the season. There's going to be plenty of opportunities for Ted Hurst. I really like Ted Hurst here in round 12, and I'm going to reach for him. I do not care. But now I want to hear from you guys. Let me know down in the comments what you think about these draft picks. Am I absolutely crazy for telling you to draft all of these handcuff running backs and crazy rookie wide receivers in this middle to late rounds of your draft? Let me know in the comments down below. We could have a discussion about it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're new here, a lot of you have been new here over the last month or so. 80% of you are not subscribed to the channel. That is crazy. If you like fantasy football content, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. I'm trying to hit 1K subscribers. Even if 10% more of you hit that subscribe button, that makes me a hell of a lot closer to that 1K subscriber mark, and that would make my absolute year. And if you're already subscribed, Outlier Militia, I see you, baby. Smash that like button down below so we could do the next installment of this video, round 13 and on of your fantasy football drafts. But that's all the time I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. My name is Turtle. This is Outlier Fantasy. And I will see you in the next video. Wow, you stuck to the end of this video? Thank you so much. If you're new here, make sure you check out one of these videos on the screen right now. And don't forget, before you leave, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any fantasy football videos on this channel. That's all I got for you guys. I'll see you in the next one.